and welcome back. This is the first time I've been in the studio when you were online.
Yes, a couple of times.
First time I'm here since
we returned to the traditional frequency.
I wish all of us the best.
How have you been?
I've been doing well. Doing a few things here and there. But generally, we can thank God for good health.
Well, there's one thing that has not been doing particularly well. That's the economy. In fact, since the last time we spoke, at the time you were worried about the state of the economy. At this point, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the economy. If at that time you were worried, where are we currently?
Well, the situation has certainly deteriorated, and thanks for the opportunity to discuss some of these issues, and to your listeners who were listening back then. It's obvious that we were not in a good shape, and even ahead of the IMF, issues like the debt level, and particularly our inability to access the markets, because the budget is heavily debt dependent. We've spoken about it in the past, we can talk about it, heavily debt dependent. So if you cannot go to the sovereign bond market, where we have been relying for loans from last year, 2021, and this year, the prospects for going back, is even dimmer. Doing expensive, external loans, and then also the attempts you can see to rely on the domestic, bond market has not been that successful because of what we call uncovered auctions, which means that if government wants a certain amount of money to finance the budgets from the domestic market, it was not getting it until recently. It had to increase the interest rate.
Okay.
So all these things, were signals, clear signals that things were not going well. But what should have brought a wake-up call, major one, was the downgrades.
Okay.
Because currently we are, if we want to go to the bond market, we are in C. And C is not a place to be in the bond market. It's what is generally called, you're heading towards the junk bond category. Okay. So you have to pay very high interest rates. And the interest rates, it doesn't matter whether you're in the bond market. It's even, you can see from the terms of the syndicated loan that went around on the platform, people were looking at, yes, that's what it means. It means the market knows that you are dependent on debt. So
okay.
Let's simplify it. It's like you've been borrowing in the community, you've not been paying, and the money lender is just waiting for you. Because when you come, he knows how desperate you are. It's in a community. You have to pay fees, you have to do all this. So the terms of which he will give you the money then changes, even if you have been going there. And we know it in our communities. So that's the sort of situation we are in now. And so, ultimately here we are, with the IMF again. And there has been attempts to, let me just make 2 points in my introductory remarks, to kind of say that the crisis we faced, back when we went into the IMF, were domestic. And at this time it is COVID.
Yeah. COVID, Ukraine and Russia has come.
Yes. But the same commentators say that even the Akufo-Addo administration faced the beginning of the global financial crisis, but it ended somewhere. And so the global financial crisis could not be domestic, because it started in 2008 in earnest, 2007, 2008. But the full impact was from 2009. And we must say that many stalwart African countries, South Africa, Nigeria, and others, went into the recession during that period. Ghana did not go into recession. In fact, the closest we came in terms of low GDP growth was 3.6, which in the new basis is 2.8. And so you can compare it, with the 0.4. We almost went into recession due to COVID. Secondly, we face crisis. You can say that single spine, the wage overrun was domestic, yes. But if you take Dumso, what we came to call just Dumso, the origin, is the oil, gas flow from Nigeria, if you remember, and the breach of the oil pipeline for about 2 years plus 2.5 years or so before it was restored. I was joking the other day on one of the radio stations that I didn't know when Nigeria became a region in Ghana to say that crisis that began there is domestic. It cannot be. So the father is in West Africa, they don't make, the crisis. And even if it's domestic, like bushfires and the rest, you can't underrate them.
Okay.
Drought, you can't underrate them. And then finally we face the fall in, the break, like China and others melted down, affected around 2014 when we were reading the budget. And the impact and the tariff bearing, the fall in crude oil prices, we did budget $99, and we found ourselves with a price of less than $30 at a point, and it never rose, until 2017, when the prices started going up, and they are where we are today. But in addition to that, 2 additional oil fields. We manage with 1 oil field. And we can talk about some of the achievements. So that's the first thing I'd like to point out, that, to our listeners and to those particularly on, who may be concerned, within the, the NDC and others, and actually others who are commentators, and that we did not face only domestic crisis. And even then, what is domestic? Domestic crisis can be severe. Okay. We had Ebola, SARS, which affect the region, globally, and other things. But the critical point is, if you underestimate somebody's crisis, you will not prepare for your crisis.
If you underestimate somebody's crisis,
yes,
you will not prepare for it.
You will not be well prepared for the crisis that you will meet. So we found ourselves with 3 oil fields, not increasing the stabilization fund. And much of the money that was taken out of the stabilization fund was what we left with 1 oil field. Remember when COVID came?
1 oil field, lower prices of crude on the international market.
And then tariff bearing, lower output. We were able to. We paid 336 million of the Akufo, the bond that was issued in the Excellency Akufo's, era. And then we left 250 million, 200 million of which was used, to pay the balance of the bond on October 4th, 2017, 10th anniversary. It was money we left. And the remaining 200 million, we used a bond that we issued to refinance it. Okay. And then we back it with the same sinking fund. Those structures have been dismantled, we know them. Today both the sinking fund and the stabilization fund, will be ending at virtually zero or very low, which means that Ghana is not prepared for the next crisis.
If you say they are ending at zero or very less,
it's in the budget. Look at the medium term.
Is that to suggest that there'll be nothing in them?
Yes, in the case of sinking fund from 2024, there'll be nothing in them, according to the estimates, which means that it will either be used to service debt, to the rollovers that are taken per year, instead of directly reducing the debt.
Well, I realize you didn't mention what we are worried about: prices of goods, because the fuel prices, the inflation. When we're raising the issues of debt,
yes, because I was okay. We are on with the conversation. If you take fuel prices, remember we did ESLA. We know ESLA for the banking sector crisis, and again we should not take the blame. We did the audit. We did ESLA. ESLA is going to bring 53 billion. It used to be 43 billion by 2026, 2027.
53 billion
Ghana cedis. Yes.
Okay. That's the total amount that it will have brought in since you started. And the
total amount it has brought in so far is just under 23 billion or so.
Okay.
Right.
23 billion from ESLA alone.
Yes. And so 2 questions. The ESLA debt, which is said to have been recovered. Of course, there are others that go into road, and the rest, yes. But even what goes into the banking sector costs, and they often mention the loan, is costly, it costs us so much and whatever. It was from ESLA. But if they are unable to take the ESLA money now to pay depositors, it's because they collateralized the ESLA. We were using it to pay the banks, and they were using that's VRA debt, the energy, the doomsday debt. That was one of the primary reasons. If you are unable to pay contractors and the rest, but you mentioned fuel. There's a fuel element in there, which is being collateralized, because the reality is that the concessions that were made, were for the margins, and even the OMCs and others have come and said, please restore our margin. Right? They were for the margins for the industry. They are not part of the price stabilization and levy, which is part of ESLA, which we use to start the strategic stock.
Okay.
So that's the reason, there's no subsidy. Because that's the element of, where the subsidy was parked.
The price stabilization levy.
Yeah, that's where it was parked. And it's been part of the collateralization. It's not been denied. So there is no money. The money coming in now is paying for the loan. But what did we do with the loan? We should have used the loan to extend the strategic stock, approach which we did. Yes. And
so two things you're saying. The price stabilization levy was supposed to provide the funds that are needed
to pay subsidy, and then second to provide the funds.
Okay.
For future, the past subsidy, which we started paying, and then the future. But we also ring-fence part of that money to start the strategic stock.
Okay.
Which means that you buy fuel and to store the tanks, and you store them when the prices are low. And then as the prices start going up, you release them, because at a margin that is below, so you don't pass on the full impact. I mean, South Africa, US, and others, they do strategic stocks. Right. But we started that initiative, and that was stopped. So my understanding is that the money was even taken from, from Boston Tor. Yeah.
So your approach clearly in this time, based on ESLA, was that if you were a finance minister using the ESLA idea, you would have had money in the price stabilization revenue fund.
We would have accumulated. Yes. We were going to accumulate in 5 years, because remember 3 to 5 years, because remember ESLA itself was a temporary tax to resolve a problem, which was the energy sector debt, IPPs and the rest, the power they supplied, during the doomsday period. Okay. For which government was not able to pay, because we had other things like the single spine and other issues. So it was to last 3 to 5 years, and from the figures I'm talking about, it should have ended in 2020.
Okay,
because
because
and at that time we were going to accumulate. We are started accumulating, just like the sinking fund I was talking about, accumulating the fund, ring-fencing it, so that we can use it to address future increase in crude oil prices, because crude oil prices go up and down. So what we're doing, if I may, from the stabilization fund, which we built, we built it when prices were high with one oil field, and then when prices start going, down, and the budget starts to take a hit, ABF and the rest, then you release it.
Okay.
Right. Similarly, you in the case is a reverse. When crude prices are low, then you build your strategic stock. When they are high, then you release it.
Okay.
You see, it's somewhere like the reverse, because they have different impacts.
Yeah.
Right. The low price affects your budget. The high price improves your budget. But you have to make sure that the high price is going to affect the pump. So when the price is low, you build strategic stock. So that when it's high, then you release, the kind of stock. And that's what we call counter-cyclical policies. Because you move against,
I'm guessing you are listening to the NDP, because majority of them make the point that we're in this position because one of the decisions you took was to take subsidies off. You inherited subsidies, you took.
We didn't take it off. The subsidies, yes, we liberalized.
Yeah.
But we had mechanisms in place.
So the problem is that they are not using the mechanism.
No, they use the money. They collateralize.
But not for the purpose.
Yeah, I've not heard that argument that they're blaming us. No,
I have sat through conversations where
let's be quite clear in that the price stabilization, they should tell us what they did with the price stabilization. Consumers are still paying, even now when the prices are high, they are paying at the pump. So where's the money?
So the other aspect is because BOST still operates.
Yes.
They have a chief executive officer.
Yeah.
They said the key mandate of BOST is to keep strategic stocks.
Precisely. And that's when we started. And with Mr. Wedako.
Okay.
When he was in charge of BOST and TOR. Yeah, we started it. In fact, we made the first releases in 2016.
Okay.
Yes. And BOST and TOR and the portion from Ministry of Finance, after paying the rent and other things to them, from the this about 2 million, which we plowed back. 2 million Ghana cedis, yes, which we plowed back. You will remember, because it wasn't just TOR, BOST, GOIL.
Okay.
So those days you remember when, prices were going up, we released to GOIL,
yeah.
And then GOIL would say so GOIL was like the stabilizer. You remember those days, yes, against the other. But we were going to open it because the scheme was working. So the other one was for the money we left for the infrastructure fund, for them to expand the pipelines, repair the broken pipelines, expand the pipeline, to up north, and then build more, we call it farm tanks.
Okay.
And we were going to invite the BDCs to also buy low. It's not just government; they can buy low and store and pay toll, so that when the prices start going up, they can also release. So that overall we have that mechanism, for. So it's not that we liberalize. But he also talk about liberal. But we had all these mechanisms too. Yes.
All in place.
Then
another thing I realized.
Not just in place, we have started them. It's just like they blame us for the banking sector crisis. We should accept it because that was there. And let me give you an example, which I gave recently. The capitalization for banks is still 400 million.
Yes.
Yes. So we were on the bad bank approach, right? So if 10 banks, if you liquidated 10 banks times 4 for 400, it's 4 billion.
4 billion, yes.
You could have easily paid that from ESLA. Looking at what we are talking about, the revenue that's in there. That's the bad bank approach. So you intervene immediately with the resources. Yeah, and this was, part of the, experience from non-performing assets recovery trust and what other can. Remember global financial crisis when U.S., they didn't let Bank of America and the rest fall. They saved them. And then the Fed made money. So because when the banks become strong, then they repay. Yeah, and then then from that repayment, you build a protective fund for the banking sector.
Well, if you just join,
so we had initiatives. I don't think we should be accepting, what they are telling us.
I'll come back to one of those initiatives shortly. Just to remind everybody that if you're just joining us, I have Honorable SETH EMMANUEL in the studio with me, former finance minister. Fortunately for him, he remains the former finance minister because his successor is still in office. So that means that he was you are the most recent past former finance minister. There's one other aspect, because we are not hearing the story of TOR. Well, I'm still on the matter of the fuel prices. I realized before he left office, Mr. Wedako, who was then also responsible for BOST and TOR, I think we put the two together for him, also did some refining, bought some crude.
Part of them was ESLA.
Okay.
Yes, the TOR debt. Yeah, we refinanced it, part of it from ESLA. Which TOR was then, and there were some partnership that was being planned with, to open it up PPP, and therefore, so that's the scheme we were talking about. I worked on it very closely with it.
So there was a plan to revitalize TOR, put it back on a footing where they can refine.
Yes, which is just the same model using part of the ESLA to do that.
So the ESLA was going to ensure that there were subsidies in place in case fuel price gone up. You have strategic stocks, and then TOR was also going to come on board. Yes, and then part of it was to pay contractors, particularly road contractors. Yes, and then revitalize the energy sector. In fact, before we left, apart from, you recall that in 2016, when the revenue, it was ESLA was 2015, 2016, around May, we did the first refinancing of VRA debt, which was 2.2 billion, after we had injected 500 million into the banks. But I'm saying all this because at this time, all they say is that fuel prices are going up it is not our fault, there's nothing we can do about it. You're
There's
saying you left them a mechanism that they should be using money.
The money we are paying now. The irony is that that stabilization levy is in the taxes, which we are paying now when you go to the pump, as we speak.
Interesting. Well, there's another aspect, the issue of the food crisis. I don't know if you're paying that particular attention to that one, because it's a huge issue. From everything is going up, bread and all those things. Where within your analysis would you fit that?
Fertilizer is very important, because even when you have the rains and water, we're dependent on that, and that's what's also affecting the cocoa sector.
Okay.
And that goes back to the budget, which is dependent on debt, and we cannot go to the markets, so we cannot provide the support that the farmers need adequately.
Okay.
Yes, because of total revenue, there are two indices you can use. The first one is compensation and interest, and we've discussed it in the studio.
Okay.
Taking all the revenue and the first quarter performance, with the government release, shows it clearly, that it hasn't changed. It's getting worse. Then the IMF in the Article 4 has another, variant of it, where remember, if you are using compensation and interest, then you are either recurrent, you are borrowing, capital, you are borrowing, arrears, you are borrowing, and debt repayment, principal, you are borrowing.
Okay.
Right.
You're borrowing for all those items.
For all those items. So the fund adds the repayment of principal above the line, adds it to interest, right? And the two is 129% of the total revenue, which means that your total revenue cannot cover those two items. But ordinarily, you should be able to up to 30%. Your
debt repayment.
Let's go to the individual so that our audience don't get lost. Yeah. So you've been borrowing and borrowing, you've not been paying. You've just been postponing and whatever. So you go to last resort. You go to somebody and he says, "Okay, give me the statistics where you are borrowing from various places." So you bring them together, and he asks you, "What's your salary?" And assuming you say, "My salary is 100," then the commitments you have, not for the new loan you want, the commitments you have for the existing loan, is that if you add the interest you have to pay on those old loans to the debt itself, the principal, right, that you have to pay, it is 129% of your salary, of your 100. So it means that you have a shortfall on old loans of 29 to 30%. In other words, by some magic, your salary should increase to 130 before you can even service. And mind you, this one is not talking about money that you need for food, for whatever. You want money to pay school fees and the rest. And that's because you've been borrowing in the past, and that's the outcome. And that's where the nation is. So
that is one of the reasons we are where we are in terms of the food crisis.
Yes. And is it a fund? This is in the article. Later on we'll read through some of them. You see.
Okay.
It's in the 2021 Article 4.
I decided to bring those issues up because they are
very important.
They are the
so the fertilizer, yes. So what we are saying is that if you're in that situation, then you cannot be providing fertilizer subsidy and other in the other sectors of the economy.
Because I'm hearing you listen to farmers who are then saying, I am unable to plot the total farmland that I had projected because I can't afford fertilizer and other inputs. They are so high, I have to cut down.
And even if the rains are good and you are timely and you get it right, we cannot even resurface. Like cocoa roads and all those things in the hinterland. Yeah. All those things have come to. So even getting the food out. It's not that, our approach was perfect, completely perfect. But at least it was progressive and getting it somewhere. Because we did major infrastructure. And by the way, we did major infrastructure whilst the debt, rate at which we were accumulating debt was going down. Yeah.
Well, now let's go back to because these are what we see, but there are other issues that have to do with when people say, because I was listening to Nana Akufo-Addo who was saying primary balance among others, which are the things that the IMF will use to
primary balance is another test.
Yeah.
And the primary balance is again taking your revenue. You know, your ability to pay debt, your ability to pay expenses depends on the revenue that you are bringing.
Okay.
So if you take, you know, that ability to take, to pay, and they take out interest and also sometimes, you know, outside payments and the rest, you know, would you be in a position to finance your budget? Yes. You know, so that's simply what it means.
Well, let me take you back to when you were finance minister. You were in charge. At some point in time, you made the decision to go to the IMF. This after you had gone to Senchi, develop a homegrown policy document, and you had started implementing some of the policy proposals that you have made that were endorsed by civil society, other economic groups. You didn't get the MPP's full endorsement. You got some members turning up, but you got some endorsement for the policies you had put forward. Then you had to make the decision to go to the IMF. Remind us why you made that decision, and are there similarities between what is happening now and then? Because people say what you had then that took you to the IMF is more compared to what they are taking to the IMF now.
Look, let's get a sequence. Let's go back to Professor Mills.
Okay.
With his chairman of economic management team.
Okay.
Then
that is the vice president who became president after.
If you remember, immediately he got into office, he started reforming the revenue institutions.
Okay.
We created GRA. Then I established National Revenue Secretariat. Back in 1984-86, which should have been the apex body to unify. We didn't do it. Then we brought in REGB. There was an executive secretary who was just there. He didn't have authority.
Okay.
So one of the initiatives was to create a revenue authority, which other countries have gone. In fact, the man who helped in creating NRS, Mr. Labisian, became the first Commissioner General for Uganda.
Okay.
And he became the Commissioner General for Rwanda. But luckily came back home and was assisting in some of these measures because he came back home and started advising under the Akufo administration.
Okay.
What did that do? We had 3 commissioners: VAT Service, IRS, and Customs, all on the board of operations, right? Reporting and the cohesion that was needed. You know, there was because there was a board where they went and everything. Operationally, we were not. You know, so we created a revenue authority and gave Commissioner General. Quick one. We also merged IRS and VAT with a view to strengthening domestic tax administration. West Blue, single window. We started automating, you know, customs, right? You see these bold initiatives. Later, when President Mills took over, we revamped all the tax laws.
Okay.
The Income Tax Act was 2000. We brought it to the modern era. 2000, there was no way. You know, services sector were not that big. It just started coming up and overtook. You know, so you had to. We did VAT. We revamped the VAT Act, which was 1998. The Customs Act, which was 1993. In fact, 1985. Okay. You know, and then we created a new Excise Act, and then we passed legislation, regulations, and others. We did all these initiatives. Under the Mama administration, we were doing this. In fact, as later, then we were doing the PFMA, GIFMIS, and all those reforms, which is the
structural reforms.
Reforms. Okay. If you take our IMF program, they are there in the structural reforms.
Okay.
But remember, we bundled all of this in the 2013 budget, very first budget. Okay. For President Mahama, and we said this was where we're taking the country, and then those were the translation of the homegrown policy.
Okay.
So first point, you can do an IMF program, but if your eyes is on improving your economy and changing things, you can continue. The fund will listen to you.
Okay.
They'll give you advice. Right. So we continued. We didn't. So with this, we wanted to, you know, under President Mills, you know, my former boss, Dr. Dufo, we did a program and we exited. But we couldn't resolve the single spine issues. We couldn't. The doomsaw came in just when we were ending that program. If you remember, through the 2016 electioneering, you know, 2013, no, 2012.
Okay, 2012.
Yes, electioneering, President Mahama even said he was fed up. He was going to find solutions because they kept telling him the bridge, the oil pipeline will be fixed and all those things. When it was fixed, we lost some VRA workers. If you remember when they flashed it and all that. Yeah.
Yes, I recall.
Okay. So we were already doing significant reforms. Frankly, under the guidance of a technical assistance from the IMF, from the World Bank, but GIFMIS was funded by the World Bank.
Okay.
The African Development Bank was at the table, and we were doing all these reforms. So we felt we wanted to discuss two programs, what we call policy support instruments. You do your own reforms, but just like you are Article 4, whether you do a program with a fund or not, they'll come because you are obliged under that. Yes, what they call Article 4 because Article 4 of the agreement that you signed to become a member. And they do it for the US, for Germany, everywhere. So we said incorporate the reforms when you come. We'll discuss with you how far, and in your Article 4 in your staff visit and everything. That's what the PSI, Kenya and others do it. Alternatively, we do a standby, but we're not up there yet. Now, the trigger was that because the sales price was so severe, which was postponed to 2010, and by 2013 there were still major arrears, some of the development partners said, they were not convinced that the measures we were doing, including the new ones, will be effective. They withheld budget support. And at that point, we went to Senchi. We decided to do a fund program, but we didn't give up.
Okay.
So you see sinking fund you do, which, remember, again under Professor Mills, the first part of it didn't include sinking fund and the rest. The first part, stabilization fund, ADF, and were done under the PRMA.
Okay.
Right. So we added sinking fund, and then we started the contingency fund, which was in the Constitution, but we never, implemented.
So
we were building,
deal with the matter of the debt.
Yes. So, I mean, again, to bring it down to your listener, because sometimes they say we are losing them. What is it that affects the economy? Debt. So we established a sinking fund because you can't be borrowing and then throwing it out and then be paying only interest. It will catch up with you. That's what has happened. Remember, we have a debt which you've thrown away 40 years, 15 years, and whatever, and we are paying only interest. Yeah. The future generation are the ones who are going to pay it. Just as the Akufo bond just chance on it. Yeah. So by 2014, when we established a sinking fund, we realized that, hey, if we had won the election in 2017, we would have had to cost $750 million US to pay. Just as we have to cost, nearly 500 million or plus to pay the zero coupon bond.
Okay.
Right in 2026, right, whichever administration is in power. So debt was a problem. So we did a sinking fund. The way we financed commercial infrastructure was a problem. So we did Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. Okay. Because everything was on government. Like I was saying, the budget is dependent on loan. And so when a loan is state-owned enterprises, subsidies and things which you couldn't pay. So under that scheme which we call self-financing or smart borrowing, we set Terminal 3. We take the airport tax and use it to pay. So Terminal 3, we didn't issue a sovereign guarantee. The airport tax, yes.
Okay.
It's airport tax, which is the one that we use because we agreed to pay it on escrow, to repay the debt.
Okay.
MPS, Toma Port Expansion, same thing. Is a port dues and others which is supposed to pay for it. Okay. Because they are state-owned enterprises and they're supposed to use these resources to repay. So we sat down with our people. In fact, our current chairman, who was the chairman of Ports and Highways Authority, yes, he was coming to my office. Tony Vita was the chairman of Ports and Highways Authority.
It was Ghana Airports, yeah.
Yes, with Charles Osari. He was coming to my office. And Charles Osari had experience with some of these things from Slate because they had commercial, they were using how to do commercial loans and the rest. So we did all these initiatives. The point I'm making is that because we were forced, if you want to put it that way, to do the fund program, we said, okay, we'll continue with these initiatives.
Okay.
ESLA.
And the fund agreed.
With our, fund, of course they agreed. Okay. Because it's a consensus. You have to convince them. ESLA is not a conditionality in our program. Sinking fund is not a conditionality in the program we did with the fund. Contingency fund is not a condition. Those are Ghanaian initiatives.
Okay.
But we remain faithful to them. Right. So if you were able with this initiative to take $250 million US, could you have taken more when you had 3 oil fields? That's how you win yourself of the IMF. And so to give you 2 examples, we say we use 550, just 2. We use 550 million of our own money, 200 million of which was used by current administration, 250 million stabilization fund. In fact, it's about 400, including what has been added by the current administration. If you add the two, that's what 800 to 900 million of our own money. How much did we get from the IMF when we did our? It was 913 or something US dollars, and we've been able to, prove that we can accumulate that money ourselves. If we had continued, we would have accumulated more. And probably we wouldn't take 1 billion from the IMF for COVID support, because we would have been able to take out 700 or 800 million with 3 oil fields. Right. So we had a path, to making sure that you are not ostracizing the IMF. Right. When I say that, people say, "Oh yeah, you work in the fund." Yes, I work in the fund, but you learn from what countries like the Asian Tigers and others who have been with the fund. They engage the fund.
Ghana's gold.
They engage the fund. But it is when the crises get deeper and things are tough, then you go to them for a lower loan, and then you can repay fast, and you get out within a year or two. And it's usually to support, as a developing country, the central bank. Because when commodity prices fall and all those, which is what often happens, it means that they can't get the forex.
Okay.
And that's why you have to be careful with certain policies. If you see the controversy between GUTA and the AGI on the benchmark, it's because you reduce the value of imports, right? And so imports become cheaper. And now there's a global crisis. You've become dependent on the external, sector. So your industries will struggle. Because you're importing goods cheap, you've reduced the value on which the tax is based. If the domestic good costs 100 and the import costs 100, and you import a tax of 20% on them, 120. Domestic cost of production is and price is 100. Import plus overheads and margin is 100.
Okay.
So if the tax is 20, right? Now if you reduce 1 by 50%, the import will be
cheaper.
50 plus 20, 70. But this one will remain 100, plus, yes.
Okay.
And when inflation hits and whatever, it becomes worse. When your forex, falls and whatever, it becomes worse. So you can do some of these things with fanfare. But so obviously those who are importing will favor their policy. But what you need is a balance, because you also want to promote domestic industry. And let me address one other issue, which I know has been coming out, that we shut the door to, under the program, and it's a fear, and that's why they are NAPCO and the rest, and no, we didn't shut the door to employment.
In fact, they said you bred graduate employment. Please
download the, where we live, and you can confirm. Download our how do you call it, memorandum, letter of intent, a memorandum of economic policy. We said we will rationalize public sector pay in the light of the single spine that we were doing, right? And we will fill public sector, space, as and when there is attrition and the rest.
Okay.
If you use the public sector, the civil service in particular, as a source of employment, you have an establishment. There are many journalists who would like to come and work in Radio Gold. You can recruit them, but they'll be sitting here in the outer office, not doing anything. Our approach was infrastructure. Can you imagine how many jobs have been created, by Terminal 3? Can you imagine how many jobs have been created by port expansion? Can you imagine how many jobs will be sustained if we had maintained the cocoa routes and not brought it to its needs? Can you imagine how many jobs we would have created, or we created, with the e-schools, with the hospitals? That's more sustainable way of creating jobs. It doesn't mean we are shutting the door, because as you are expanding the port and you are expanding, the economy is expanding. And the public sector will need more people to manage a larger economy. right? So you are doing the two in conjunction.
So you did not shut the door to employment. What you did was change the approach.
We did not. We remember we had a backlog. Part of it is because of the backlog single span that we were clearing. So it became difficult, for example, there was an agitation, for example, to take on board private nurses and the rest, private sector nurses, which eventually would have happened if you are, the rate that we were expanding hospitals. Like the public say you need them.
Okay.
But you need to expand the economy, you need to finish all those things, then you expand ultimately. Right. Otherwise, we would have ended where we are today, where compensation is taken, because, and you'll be owing the NAPCO people. This is what we're doing. So I think that reforms and change means that you look at what you are doing currently and make modifications. You look at what others have done which work for them, Exim Bank and the rest,
So,
but we can,
I'll come back to this. Now, so, do you see any similarities between the situation you face and theirs?
Oh, crisis.
So, crisis.
Yeah, the falling commodity prices. For example, with exports, gold, cocoa. If you look at our, one of our review reports is there. Somebody read it to me, in Joy's studio. Where the reason we gave for not being able to meet one of the criteria was because gold and cocoa prices had fallen. Right, and that's where you need the counter-cyclical policy. So at the time that the price is high, you ring fence part of the revenue. So that's what we bring in there. So the difference is that these measures were stopped. If you read, the this thing, let me just. If you may, I hope I can find it quickly.
Well, if you just join us, is Honorable SETH EMMANUEL in the studio with me. We are discussing the economy, and then we'll come back to the path that is taking us to the IMF and what we should be expecting. But in the meantime, at Noble Trust, they provide effective and high-quality healthcare for patients suffering from heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, fatty liver, kidney disease, infertility in male and female, prostate disorders, fibroid and ovarian cysts, stroke, and general screening of other chronic diseases. Noble Trust Herbal Clinic was adjudged the overall best herbal clinic in the year 2021 and has won other multiple awards over the years. Don't forget, when you go there, they have modern laboratory equipment, scanning machines, and their team of well-trained professionals are ready to attend to all your wellness and health needs. You can locate Noble Trust at Banana and Abolo Junction, and Ashaiman Middle is near Nuru Mustafa Mosque. Call them on 0244 401 929 or 0267 117 666 or 0244 401 878. Like my colleague Buachi said, there was a banana seller who told him that if you go to Noble Trust and listen to whatever they tell you, do what they tell you to do, you won't fail. Whatever problem you take there will be resolved for you. We have a few stories around here to tell. So trust at Noble Trust Herbal Clinic. Experience the true care. Okay, Honorable.
Yeah, even before I read what I wanted to read, you talk about similarities and differences.
Okay.
We are not underestimating, COVID.
Okay.
We are not underestimating the Russian war.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I would be, hypocritical in saying that we also had, crisis.
Okay.
And we are not saying that it's not the largest to date.
Okay.
But before COVID, the global financial crisis was the largest,
Okay.
To date, and it will always come with it. But there's one qualitative difference.
Okay.
You can go back to the Rawlings era. Yes, they did adjustment programs and the rest, but none of the governments got money exclusively to tackle the crisis. Nearly $6 billion US. If you multiply that, let's not multiply by 8 today. Let's multiply that by 7 average between 2020 and 2021 when these monies were received, including Bank of Ghana's 10 billion, which is 1.7% of GDP, and all that. Right.
That's 42.
That's about 42 billion.
Yeah.
Yes. And just how much did GRA bring, in terms of revenue, during that period. I hope I can find it. Tax revenue in the 2022 budget is 80 billion. More than half of what GRA brings in a year.
That's money they got exclusively
to tackle COVID. From the COVID loan, 1 billion. Bank of Ghana, 1.7 billion. World Bank, close to 600 or something. African Development Bank, development partners, PPEs and things from China and all of those things.
Stabilization
and on top
fund,
of stabilization fund, our own money. And to top it, $1 billion SDR. Add them up. Exclusively. So why are you complaining?
You did not. So the
I'm saying
difference
that, I said that go back. Yes. Maybe you can say the HIPIC is the only one that comes close. But HIPIC was, a debt forgiveness, not tackling a specific, it was general to the economy. So what was wrong? That this money could not cater for COVID. And we keep blaming COVID. And how come we couldn't prepare the grounds? And immediately within 1 month of Ukraine war, we started blaming the Ukraine war for the crisis. The answer is in the Article 4, 2019. There was a fiscal gap going into COVID, which was unfilled. And among the resources that were to be used, which were itemized there, were the issuance of more sovereign bonds, domestic market borrowing, and gold monetization of gold royalties. So it's not new. Japan is not new. Right. So we say that yes, there were similarities, but there are also differences.
And the major difference for you is that you got money to solve these problems, whatever difficulties you identified.
Precisely.
So you're asking why they're still complaining?
Yes, why they're blaming and they're comparing to other government. None of it from the Rawlings administration since we've been going, from Dr. Butcher's time and everything. No administration, bushfires and everything. We got some support, but I don't think we have to this amount. And they normally came by way of budget support. You see, but we were talking about the importance of reforms.
But before you go there, was that money enough? Because they also talk about the fallout from COVID, supply chain challenges. You're talking about a food crisis.
They quantify it was 3% of GDP. And GRA's 80 billion, the entire 100 billion in the budget, is, let's see, it's supposed to be 20%.
Okay.
And in fact, in 2021, they could do only 16%. So you can't even increase your revenue by 4 percentage points.
Okay.
2020. And that's one of the issues which we're going to discuss. And it includes e-levy. So e-levy is not additional. Right. So if you take that to be half of this, and this is 20%, then half of it is 10% of GDP. So
every problem that they faced was quantified, and
it was quantified.
No,
it was 3%.
Okay.
The quantification said that they needed money, the gap, and that was identified. Yes, and the cost of COVID and all that was 30%.
So you don't see the reason why they're still talking about COVID, going back to the matter of COVID?
No,
because even now they said COVID, and then now Ukraine, Russia.
Yeah, Ukraine, Russia is it's severe. But this is what should have been anticipated to build the buffers, which were stopped. That's the point where that's a part. Remember, at the time we were building the buffers, crude oil prices had fallen and everything. But we knew that if we slipped, so calling on the government to review free SHS. Free SHS is not an exclusively, MPP policy. We had a progressive free education, and our approach was to build e-schools. But remember going to the 2016 elections, if you remember very well. 2016 elections. We reduced it. We were going to do 200 e-schools, if you remember.
Yeah.
If we reduce it, we said we'll do 150, and even the 150, we said, we would consider doing it when we have 10 field and Sankofa field and the economy expands in 2017, 2018. And what we could complete was, my recollection is 50. I was corrected, but someone who said it's 46. Was the schools we had envisaged to finish. So we also did corrections. We did belt tightening. It wasn't the conditionality in the IMF program we did. We were in an IMF program. If you go and check the IMF program, they will acknowledge it, but it was not a conditionality. We did this ESLA, this one and everything, because we wanted to manage the economy. And then we did give me, and we started tightening. Because I wouldn't say tightening. Yes, we were tightening through checking abuse. So we stopped paper processing and everything, and we said send everything to us electronically and let us, And we included all of this over 3 years in the. But to read, it's saying that expanding the coverage of government debt statistics would provide a better understanding of debt vulnerabilities. The government's headline measure for debt and arrears excludes liabilities that pertain to the central government, including ESLA debt, after it was collateralized. Okay. Now the debt has to be added. It's not being added. Education.
That's
into
get fund.
Bracket, yes, get fund, stroke Dachi. The fund is even mentioned, which was a bond that's the name of the bond.
Yeah.
Yes, so they're mentioning it. And extra budgetary funds, such as Hydro, and which are included in SAF's definition of public debt. The IMF is saying we include it. You may not include it. Remember when we're talking about burial costs, being shown as footnotes and all that, it confuses the whole picture. It gives the impression that we're doing well. We're not.
So the IMF is saying to assess your full debt situation, we always have to go back to
that
the ESLA debt or get
that
fund.
Is what is in our laws. That's what we have always done. That's what Rawlings administration did. That's what Kufuor administration. You can go back maybe, I don't go back to Bush and the rest.
Oh, it's a legal requirement.
Yes, it's part of the calculation, how you calculate your deficit.
Because at
you show it. Yes, you show it. So divestiture receipts was shown. You remember? Divestiture expenditure was shown. In fact, the HIPIC is not just expenditure. The HIPIC MDR stroke HIPIC inflows were shown above the line in the budget. Right. So if you have extraordinary expenditure and incomes, including the COVID loan and the rest, which were not fully shown in the budget, right? How do you compare yourself with past administrations? But that's our law. We don't have to wait for the fund to tell us to do it. And we've been talking about this ourselves. Remember, we've spoken about the treatment of bidder costs. And these are the things which, so now hopefully we would know. But remember this Article 4, 2021, which was issued July last year, and it's now out. 1 year on. And so there are truths which we have to face as Ghanaians. It's not the fund that's coming to tell us.
And thank you for raising the matter of that truths. Because there are people wondering, okay, so what really are we taking to the IMF? But from reading what you just read, it seems the IMF already knows a lot of what we are
because you have to give them. Remember Article 4, you have to open up, whether you're in a program or not. And then we have to be sending them monthly and quarterly statistics. And when they're not satisfied, they will fire questions to you. So we have a regular engagement with the IMF, the World Bank, and all this, African Development.
And all this is documented.
It's documented. And this is the authorities' response. They put it there. Authorities' views. And look at what in response to that. The authorities stress, when it's authorities, it's government.
Okay.
The authorities stress the non-inclusion of expenditure arrears in the 2020 fiscal deficit. Right. So when you see the deficit that is there, remember it doesn't include, the government is conceding that it doesn't include some of this. In fact, they calculated that the arrears is 2.6%. There's 2.6% of it outside the budget of GDP. What is in the budget is 0.4.
Okay.
So when that adjustment is done, by the fund now, arrears is going to be 3%. And that would include the arrears owed to the contractors, energy sector, and all those which are not being included, which will be said should be included. So when the adjustment is done and it hits us, we should know. So the authorities' non-inclusion of expenditure arrears in the fiscal medium-term projections already, noting that these arrears were yet to be audited and that the 2021 budget and fiscal medium-term priorities already, no, it's not in the medium term because arrears are supposed to reduce from 1.9 and then it keeps going down, which is just 0.4. And in fact, if you look at the medium-term budget, it's 0.0 in some instances. I don't know if I have it here, so that you can see it for.
Which arrears are those?
All arrears. Arrears owed to the food contractors who are.
Oh, okay.
Arrears owed for school feeding. Arrears owed to contractors.
Okay.
Energy sector and all that. We have a line in the budget for it. Yeah, that's what it's talking about. So the point I want to make is that there are things we just have to face up to ourselves, and luckily we have been talking about it. It's been the subject of discussions. When I've been here, and others have raised it, and these are the very issues that are going to come up. Yeah, I don't think I have the sheet for that one, which I wanted to discuss here. Yeah.
Well, so I was coming to ask you. So, what are the okay?
So you can see arrears, right? Arrears clearance. This year 2022 is 1.9, then it goes to 1.3, 1.3, and then by 2025 it's supposed to be 0. Arrears can never be 0. So if you are looking at the medium term, and you want to know, what will happen, whether the medium term has any. That's why the Fitch and others didn't have faith in the medium term. And the fund is saying that your arrears is this is 0.4, the 1.9 is 0.4 GDP.
Okay.
Meanwhile, there's 2.6, which is not being shown, which is what is being said here.
The 0 means that they will have no arrears to clear by that time.
Yeah, but it's not possible because no economy will not have arrears at the end of the year.
Well, but you said there are a couple of
so it means that the deficit will be lower, but it's lower because of this. These things, yeah.
And you think that does not paint a realistic picture?
No, I think it doesn't. It does it in offense, our public financial management act.
You don't see a way in which you say that in a particular year you have no arrears to clear?
No. It happens even in advanced countries. If you are awarded a contract in November for a road, and it was started, you're saying that you're going to pay fully by the end of the year, work done on a major road and whatever. The capacity of our budget isn't. That's why we make provision for arrears.
Well, Honorable, I was coming to the truth that you say we need to fix, you need to face. What are those truths in terms of, because you're still referring to the Article 4 document of the IMF for 2021. What are the truths that we need to face as we go before the IMF?
Oh, there are. That's one of the truths because the
issue of the debt.
Yeah, issue of the debt. The other one. Okay, I mentioned this other one already. It says public debt grew from 23% of GDP in 2007, the year the first Eurobond issuance, was issued.
Okay.
Right. We know that this was a threat for us already, and I explained why we set up the sinking fund and how we took 550 of it off. The 200 is probably also, refinance and push, somewhere, no pay. And then pushing gross financing needs above 25% of GDP, and debt service, including amortization, above 129% of revenue. I mentioned that already.
Okay.
So it shows how tight the budget is.
Okay.
And so to relax it, you have to do quite a bit to raise revenue, cut expenditure, because the debt is a build-up of arrears.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, so that is one home truth.
Okay, so that first one is about the fact that our debt servicing needs alone swallows our revenue.
Yes,
and we have to borrow to be able to fix
pay every other thing. And in this case, it means that even compensation you are borrowing to pay. But when you add compensation, then the principal becomes part of the borrowing, and that's the approach that we have been using.
Okay.
Then you this is another one. The 2021 budget financing strategy relies heavily on the domestic market, which creates risks. Despite the recent Eurobond issuance, but this 2021, that was a 3 billion. We couldn't go to the market for the 2 billion.
Okay.
We were supposed to do 5. Most financing will be provided by local commercial banks and non-bank institutions. This could push domestic absorption capacity to the limit and raise the risk of interest rate pressures, private sector crowding, and a second round of central bank financing. So you see that the central bank 1.7, in fact in the NPC report, it didn't mention COVID. It said that it will be difficult for government to borrow. And they see the possibility of Bank of Ghana financing. We took it down to 0, if you remember. Zero financing, yes. Right. So again, there's a whole truth that Bank of Ghana may have to come to the rescue.
That's according to the IMF itself.
This is a paper produced by the IMF and the authorities.
So the IMF itself anticipates that we're getting to a point where the Bank of Ghana
will continue financing. Okay. Yes, we'll continue financing the budget.
And that because he also talk about the
fact
that
if he didn't do anything.
He also talks about the fact that it looks like we are pushing the domestic market too far.
It's happening. You remember when we talk about, it's happening already between 2021 and now. Government is only able to meet all the money that it needs, to get all the money it needs for the domestic market.
Okay.
The last time it met, it had to increase the interest rate. And when you do that, there's another report which is of concern to the private sector. They've been saying you are taking money away from the private sector because the banks are the ones who are taking our savings, all of us, to give out as loan. And if government is there taking the money,
majority of it,
then it means private sector will have to compete with government because governments, they regard lending to government as safe.
And the private sector definitely cannot compete when it comes to the payment.
And this is the reason we did refinancing and others. Again, just to relate to what we did. And so you see, if you see the graph, is interest rates was slowing down, from around about 2014 when we started smart borrowing and then we did the refinancing until it started going up again, from 2020 to 2019.
You were also borrowing from the domestic market, were you not?
Yes, it's a balance. You can't. It's inevitable. You definitely borrow for a domestic balance because. But remember, you have to strengthen. But you do it in a way in which you balance. Government cannot operate without borrowing from the domestic market. So long as you you have to finance the budget and your revenue is not enough. And there is sensible borrowing, if I may use this word, to finance, infrastructure. You can't finance, let's say the railway line. Even it take you 20 years to finish those if you have to depend on your budget. So you borrow, to finance, and then you repay the debt over a period of say, 10 years, sometimes 15 years.
So, but you have to do it like you said, sensibly.
Yeah, you have to repay. If you borrow this year, which we spoke about the money lender and in the community. If you are not repaying your debt, which is what we are doing, then that's where we are today.
But if you find yourself in a situation they are in currently, you would understand why they are relying heavily on the local market because you talk about the downgrades, which means that they can't go to the international market.
Yes, and that's what the fund is drawing attention to, clearly.
So under those circumstances, what would they have done?
Precisely what, we started doing. When you borrow, pay down debt, sinking fund. And remember, even on our side, people were asking, why are you creating the sinking fund when you need the money? But then you create it to pay down the debt so that you can borrow tomorrow at a lower interest rate to do your development. You see, people don't understand, but let me explain again. Let me try and use the household again. And I've been using this quite a bit. Maybe I won't be surprised if I use it here. It's everybody who is rich. Many of us went to school. Parents, market, but they want something better for you than they had.
Yeah.
They're in the market. What do they do when they're going to school? They go and borrow for the term. By the time the next term comes and you come home, they finish paying that one. So they go to the same source and they borrow again. If they borrowed for term 1 or semester 1 and they don't pay, you think they can, you can go and give all excuses and okay, they will give you for semester 2. If you don't pay for the 2, you think you can go for second year, you'll be at home, your child will be at home. Nobody will give you the money. Because what will go around the community? And what is going around in the financial community is just like government. That we are not paying our debt. And it's going up. And we are an open record. Right? So the analogy is there. It's the same. It's just like a business. Right? I can see you've refurbished this nicely. You were not in business. So obviously somebody granted a loan. Maybe from the shareholders or from it. If you don't pay, you think you can go and refurbish the next one. Go to the same bank. You may end up taking a loan from there, coming to use it to pay the other one, as it normally happens with the microfinance and other. Yeah. You see, so I mean, so there are quite a few, expanding the coverage of government. That we read that one already, and a few, things which are here again. I can urge is available. So. Especially our analysts who do education can also talk about some of these things. So the Bank of Ghana is the measures contribute second deficit fiscal sharp increase in the public debt. So they are linking the deficit, to the increase in debt, which we know already.
Okay. So 2 things you've mentioned. You're looking at your debts. You're looking at how much you have to service those debts.
Yes.
Which other truth do you paying attention to?
Well, okay. So let's go back to, debt is a product.
Okay.
Of revenue less expenditure, and expenditure being high.
Okay.
I hope you're following. So. It's because your income is low. That's why you go and borrow.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing to go and borrow to buy a car, to buy furniture, to buy other things. But then you sit with the bank manager or whoever give you the money and you arrange a payment. Sometimes you agree, you give a standing order. So immediately your account, your salary hits the account, the bank takes that out. But you know therefore that if my salary is 5,000, I don't have 5,000.
Okay.
Because 1,000 is gone out already. Right. Sometimes when we do guarantee, sovereign guarantee, and that's exactly what we do. If you guarantee, so you debt and the rest. So the money, Bank of Ghana is required to transfer all of those monies. So the difference gives you the deficit. And then you add that deficit. You borrow to finance that deficit. And you add it to the existing debt.
Okay.
If you don't repay, the debt will be going up. If you don't repay the old debt, let's say your old debt is 20, and then the current deficit is 5. If you add it, it's 25. So if you want it to go below 20, assuming you give yourself a yardstick that my debt should be below 20, you are 25.
Okay.
So to bring it down to even 19, it means that you have to repay 6 of the old debt. Are you following me?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's have our listeners come along. Your current debt, you've borrowed for furniture, for car, and other things. So your current debt is 20, right? You need a fridge, okay, in the corner, maybe with a freezer, so that you can store goods for the week and you buy cheap and or go. So for that one, you take a loan of 6, plus other things, school fees and the rest. When you add that 6 to your 20, your total loan becomes what? 26.
Yeah.
But then the deduction will become steep because you are paying for the 20 and you have to add the 6. Right? So you have to be conscious. So if you want your debt to come down below 20 to 18 to 15, it means that over a period of 3 years, you have to pay more than the 6.
Okay.
to be able to reduce it over that period. So you tell the bank, I will pay, as I take this loan and add it, if I were paying 5, I will now pay 8, I will now pay 7. Right, over the period of the loan. Right. And as you get salary increases, you may be taking more loans for other things because maybe you are just starting life, and all that kind of thing. But then you, as your salary increases, you also have to, and your loan demands become higher, you also have to increase the repayment. Otherwise, the amount you are repaying will fall far short of the loans that you are adding. The two things are important. And that is amortization that we talk for government.
Okay.
So we have been paying just the interest. And the principal has been sitting there. So, and this is why we did a sinking fund to say, look, this habit is not good. We started with treasury bills, then domestic bonds, then we took it to the bond market. At the bond market, they'll punish your ratings. You go down if you take that habit there. If you take a habit there, and now the ratings went down. So now we don't have access. So the solution, tighten your belt. Don't put everything in consumption. And how do you tighten your belt? You look at your expenditure. You reduce a bit of the drinking, you reduce a bit of the peripheral ones which are not necessary, right? As for the food, you can't cut it. The children will cry. Right, so you come to basics. Right, and if you look at the furniture I'm going to buy this year, right, then you want to change the furniture. You want to look a bit impressive when friends come. You may end up buying furniture which is 1,200 instead of 1,500 because your loan trajectory is bad.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the idea that you need. Right? So, government is the same. So we have to look at our expenditure. Nobody, we are saying, how this is our budget. And if the budget is telling us, that the expenditure is high. We say we are going to collect 100, right? And the expenditure is 135.6 before you add arrears. And the fund is saying you have agreed with the fund that certain items are not even here in the expenditure. We've been talking about cathedral and others which were coming out.
Okay.
In fact, it's true when they talk about extra budgetary expenditure, those are the things that are not in the budget, which are being paid outside. Bring it all in so that we know the real situation. And then you have to tackle the expenditure. And I gave you an example already. When we suffered a significant cut in revenue, particularly oil, from the tariff barrier and for whatever, we brought down, we reduced, the youth schools and other things that we want to see. And I can say proudly for the leadership of President Mahama that, yes, it was distorted and all that, but the 6.1%, we shouldn't believe it's 8% or 10%, 6.1% deficit is still the best since 2016. The revenue of 15% is still the best, in the last 2 dates. And our deficit and our debt of 57% is still the best compared to 85, 57%. Because this means that there was some, and if we continue, then you are on some sustainable path. And, deficit of 6%, you are close to the 5%, which the current administration fixed. And it means that you are in the process of controlling. But remember, it didn't mean that we had to stop because we had our own innovative ways, of, doing infrastructure and the rest. So we were also able to reduce that and continue to build infrastructure and borrow. And that is the trajectory. So you have to look at the expenditure, if you ask me, and you have to look at increasing revenue. The reforms, we did the West Blue single window, now called ICOMS and the rest. The domestic equivalent of the automation to make GRA efficient was taught since 2017. I hear some tender is now being. That's how if you don't have automation, how do you expand the tax base? You end up imposing a number of levies which you cannot take off because you think that, or you block, credit and refund on VAT. You remember the straight levies?
Yeah.
But it's not yielding anything because it hasn't taken the tax to GDP ratio above 2015 when the accumulation of our reforms from GRA to, measure of IRS, VAT, and all those things took place in West Blue. So you saw the results coming. It was still low because the sub-Saharan African average, was is about 17 to 18%. But remember, we did a rebasing. When we did a rebasing, just as the rebasing and this is a new basis, we are talking about. So when you do a rebasing, yes, your debt to GDP ratio goes down, but your revenue to GDP ratio also goes down because the denominator has expanded. So you have to, it means that if you are saying the services sector that is outgrowing agric, then it means your tax structure must look at the services sector, the financial sector, the petroleum sector, those services which are making the economy, and ask yourself whether your tax is well designed to tackle them, which was the reason for the legislation reforms and things that I said earlier that we did. So we have to pay attention to all of these things. And I'm saying this for the record. People say you are offering advice. Yes, if we don't talk about it, how will people know what we did? Because our policies were bastardized. So it's time for us to let people know the credible things that we did.
Well, I'll ask you one question, and then I will let them find you some water for you to relax a little. But you made a point because, okay, first of all, the government has already indicated that they are cutting down on the expenditure that they are projected in the budget. Is that not adequate?
I want the evidence.
Evidence of that cut?
Yes, because you see, I'm not doubting. I'm not saying it's not happening, but I'm only saying that all of us want to see the figures.
Okay.
Right. If we want to avert the fund coming and saying the sort of things that they are saying, because first quarter is always tight. First quarter for every government. Revenue is just trickling in from GRA, but your wage bill doesn't go down. Your interest payment doesn't go down. Most
you have money to pay all those, yeah?
Yes, the ones you can suspend is capital expenditure.
For the first quarter.
As a revenues first quarter, sometimes into the second quarter, slightly into the second quarter. So the fact that these assurances were being given in the first sector, suspension of debt to pay later, of expenditure to pay later, is not austerity. And by the way, you couldn't suspend without attrition, compensation.
Okay.
And you couldn't limit interest payments unless you have debt forgiveness or you have a mechanism for repaying the principal faster. So what is left? Yes, the ones that have to suffer are the non-compensation. If you take free SHS, what elements? Yeah, this were the progressively fee-free, progressively fee-free and e-school strategy in competition with the unfettered, everything being put on the budget comes in for discussion.
Okay.
And it's obvious. So which one are you cutting? Let us know.
So you want to see specifics of what they've cut so far and what the impact is?
Yes. Wow. And maybe we'll get it in the media review.
But from what you see in terms of the budget, you're already putting the debt, you put the debt servicing, compensation, already taking you way above your revenue projection, what you expect to collect. Is it possible within this particular budget to cut something significantly?
Yes, because we're borrowing. I remember one figure very well, 2018 or 2019 bond. We used 2.2 billion Ghana cedis to support free SHS. Now we can go to the bond market. And we had demand that we are not going to look at. Now it's been considered as looking at free SHS is something. Yeah. It's belated. Yeah.
Well, let's just take a short breather. We're back with more because there are now some specific questions to ask about. Because there are people who are saying, hey, they are going back to IMF. Question is, what does it mean? Because there are those who even say the IMF that came in the 80s. It's a significantly different one in terms of approach from the IMF that we see currently. What should we expect? And if you're listening to Honorable SETH EMMANUEL, times are hard, but it is in difficulties that you make that you actually take steps or make expenditures that will better your future. So in the midst of these difficulties, you can buy some land, you can just save some money, find a credible plan that can acquire you some land. It will help you tomorrow. So if you want land, you want your own land, or you're a building contractor who wants land, contact Mighty Pillars Properties. We have genuine litigation freelance at Amasaman, Domiabra, Kwabenya, Danso, Manshalaja, Suhum, Obom, Samsam, Kofikwe, Dodoa, Amrahia, Oyibi, Kojo Ashong, Eimensang, Ablekuma, and within the capital city. Within the capital city, that one there means your money is plenty. Your money has to be plenty. And the guarantee access rules, electricity supply, and availability of water. Sightseeing is every Saturday from the Amasaman Stadium Road to the various sites. You can contact them on 0203-894413. 0203-894413 or 0242-142610. Mighty Pillars Properties, building tomorrow today. Like I said, my guest is Honorable SETH EMMANUEL in the studios on a good morning conversation. Well, let me just go through a few of the messages you're sending to us right now as we're having a conversation. Before I go back to Honorable SETH EMMANUEL, Stephen Ofosu says, Mama President Nana Akufo-Addo, who is the okay. Let me move on to there's Shaibu Mohammed who says, Senator, please. My honorable SETH EMMANUEL, my honorable request is to invite. Okay, he's already in here. Bismarck Koka is joining us. I hope the incompetent economic managers are ready to meet with IMF. They shouldn't go and pour out their usual lies. Baumia shouldn't go and be laughing. Okay, thank you. I think I've read enough. Abbas Amogobo is joining us. From Offenso says the misleadership of the incompetent and clueless and corrupt President Akufo-Addo Ghana has become a laughing stock in the Committee of Nations. He and the vice lie through their teeth without diplomacy or shame for power. They are only interested in sharing the taxpayers' money. Ghana is doomed. As Abbas Amogobo in Offenso. Abuna also says Ghana in coma and Nana Akufo MPP are very arrogant. Nana Akufo arrogancy is so annoying. Alasan Sule is also joining us. Good morning to you, Alasan, and a good morning to Amenyavi Stephen. Okay, he is giving RKB fans. Ejabata says the country is in downward trajectory. Everything has gone up. We can't even eat 3 square meals a day again. The teacher unions must put their feet down and demand for their better conditions. Teachers should not go back to the classroom without the collar. Of course, I'll ask all that questions to Honorable SETH EMMANUEL. Akuchang Godwin Mahama, thank you. And with the DJ says, what makes you think that the MPP are performing better than? Okay, I think he is addressing. Ametepe Kofi says, please. Okay, I think we did that. Thank you. You see, Babaka Sani says the MPP plan is to get the e-levy, then the usual, and use it to get what they want from the IMF as guarantee. Gabriel Mante, thank you. The DJ Senator, please ask him if he thinks that the e-levy will be increased in the nearest future. Suleiman Wandago is joining us. Michael Afarousu says Akufo-Addo has destroyed Ghana. Vincent Kingswood Boydo, hey, the man himself is on the show this morning. Greetings to you on the team. Akoto Samson says even the IMF has given up on the NPP. This money itself, nothing will change in this country. They destroyed the country already, and may God have mercy on us. Labista Force is joining us. Good morning to Hadia Kumapa. Good morning to you. Good morning to Lian Kwesi Bediaku, who says MPP, your lies can't save you anymore. Russia has the list of countries that have been seriously affected because of their stop annoying Ghanaians. She continues to say this MPP government power that destroy and messing up our country still want to be stubborn. Scrap e-levy now. 2024 is fast approaching. The way you'll be booted out will be unprecedented, you say. And then she again says, by their fruits they shall be known. We are finished as a country with a president like Akufo-Addo, labor unions don't allow this MP government to deceive you. Take all the monies this government owes you before they sign up with the IMF. I could do something, even if IMF gives, okay, I think I've read that already. Mustafa Dari says, what brilliant ideas, Mr. Tekpe. Be ready to take over as finance minister in 2025. Nene Kakunazu listening to Mr. Tekpe Misken of Oyata. Elizabeth Joyce Akola says, this man should have been included in the IMF delegates meeting the officials of the IMF. There's Chairman Stephen who's joining us. He's asking which TV. We are not on a TV station. Mano Boy Kwe is joining us. He says, Ghanaians, how can you leave the care of the fish in the hands of the cat and run around to ask the cow where the fish is? Thank you for that message. Let me go back to Honorable SETH Terkper. But Eric Kobler says, please, can you ask how much it will cost for Ghana to have a well and effective transport system? Not what we have now. Master Akpal, posterity is really paying Akufo-Addo and his own people back in their own coin. They are now eating back their own words. With regards to the IMF, there's a Master against says, John Pitamo, who says Ken Ofori-Atta is one of the best finance ministers in the Fourth Republic. And then the question he asked, I think I have to bring him here to come and read that question himself. Let me go back to Honorable SETH Terkper. We'll do a few more. At some point, we'll open the phone lines for you to join us. If you have any concerns to raise, if you have any questions to ask Honorable SETH Terkper on where we are headed to, we'll take those questions at some point. But before we do that, we are heading to the IMF. Because I heard your former boss, who calls himself a student of yours when it comes to matters of the economy, suggests that is the best route at this time. Do you agree that that's where we need to be going to? And what result would that actually achieve?
The question to us, what's the alternative?
The alternative?
Yes, where we are now. Because the IMF is the central bank for developing countries, which helps them out of the situation.
Okay.
And if you don't want to be there, then you have to prepare over a period of years, to be less dependent, because over that period there will be crisis and other things meeting you, but you have to be persistent. And that's what the Asian targets did. That's what the Latin American, some of the like Mexico, Colombia, and others, did. That's what the Emirates and others did. Husbanding their oil revenue, Dubai Fund. To transform Dubai that we all love, holidays and the rest. So our craft fund is a Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, and that is, so you just have to see what others have done, which has succeeded.
Okay.
So at this point, we don't have an alternative, because the markets are telling us go to the fund because they've downgraded us.
But initially they said the e-levy was the alternative. But they have had
to go
to the
but we have been saying that the e-levy is 1.4%, and it's in the budget to 2025. Every year it will produce 1.4%. Not increase revenue by 1.4%, but it will be the equivalent of 1.4% over the next 4 years. It's in the budget. If you let me see quickly if I can find it, so you can convince your listeners. Yeah. So this is the e-levy. E-transaction levy. This is a budget line, so you can read what I'm aligning here.
So e-transaction levy is supposed to bring in 6 billion 963 million 386,000. So approximately 7 billion. 7 billion. Okay, 7 billion this year. Next year is supposed to do 7.8 or 7.9, approximately 7.9. In 2023, it's supposed to in 2024.
7.9 is approximately 8 billion. So it increases by 1 billion.
Okay. Then 2024 we moved to 9 billion, approximately 9 billion, because it's 8.9.
8 to 9, 1 billion again. So every year is 1 billion.
Okay. In 2025, it does 10.
Yes, so 9 to 10, 1 billion. But when you express as a percentage of GDP, it's a constant 1.4.
1.4%.
Constant for the 4 years.
So it could.
And it's already in the budget.
So it couldn't have been the solution, because that was what they
wanted
to us.
It is in the budget, and the problem we have now relates to the budget. So how can something which is in the budget, and giving us a deficit which the fund is saying should have been higher by about 7% be a solution?
This particular budget has, because you were saying you're talking about even the projections we had on this budget in 2021. According to them, they are reporting that they made 80 billion. There are those who say the revenue was not up to 80 billion.
Yeah, it wasn't up to. It was up to 70 billion, not 80. It was about, according to Bank of Ghana, 67. So we are waiting for the mid-year review to show us the real figure.
Around 67 billion.
Yes. So that's what the Bank of Ghana disclosed, 67, 68.
So the plan was...
But it's provisional. Okay. So, but by the mid-year review, it will be certain. So we'll see how much it actually brought in. So by the time that the government was saying 70 billion, they could not realize 70 billion.
And we're looking at close to raising about half of that.
Adding about half of that.
Adding about half of it.
Yes, because you are 70 billion. As we even did a 70 billion, now you want to do 100 billion. So you're adding 30 billion, which is approximately slightly less than half of.
Okay.
Slightly half of less than the 70 billion that you raised. It's impossible.
You're saying that projection in itself was
impossible? Yes, because...
What's the basis?
No, because 70% gives you 16% approximately. So if you are not able to achieve the 70, you are doing something around 15. And the last time we did about 15 was 15 points. I have the figure. 15 points, I believe, 6 or so was 2015.
Okay.
And since then, we've not been able to hit that level, right? And now you want to increase it by 4 percentage points in a single year, from 15.17 to 20, or if you like, 5 percentage points of GDP. It's impossible. It takes, global experience. It takes about 2 years, unless you discover something big like oil.
They discovered they were hoping that they will bring in some significant amount.
Well, the fiscal principle is to be conservative with revenue, because if it's in exploration, you have it announce it yet and all that. How can it bring you that money within a year? Because it takes time to bring it on board.
0.5.
If we're looking at raising an unrealistic 100 billion, we budgeted to spend over 140 billion. That was what we had budgeted to spend.
136, but our estimates show that, which is about, our estimates show that you should add the bailout cost to it, which was deducted.
Yeah.
Yes. So we put the deficit about 143 billion.
143 billion.
So the expect 143 billion, not 137.
Okay.
Which increases the deficit.
It seems that has influenced.
But even if you take it 137, it's still big. You want to, even your 100 is already ambitious, and you are increasing expenditure, to 137. So if you don't realize 100 and you realize 80, it means that the deficit is going to be wider by 20, unless you cut the expenditure. And then we have to see the composition of that expenditure, and the bulk of it is, compensation and interest. Which is difficult to cut.
There are those who suggest that one of the reasons we are struggling on the bond market is because of this budget. That people look at the budget.
Yeah, the budget on the medium term is the evidence for the markets. Nothing else. It's not your words.
They don't see how.
No, it's not your words. No. They've analyzed the budget, and the downgrades came out of the budget.
Now, we are heading to the IMF. In fact, the president said, according to the information minister, the president picked the phone, called the the managing director of the IMF. They had a conversation, then decided that the finance minister should start engagements. We understand the IMF has started engagement today with us. How does that process work? You've been through that process before. They said they have a policy or a program that they are going to present to the IMF? How does it work?
Well, a rapport with the IMF, World Bank, and all those is very important.
Okay.
And I recall that as when I was a deputy, I traveled with President Mahama on another assignment, I believe, in Washington, New York or so.
Okay.
And he sought audience with the World Bank Vice President and other, people, and he was given. Ngozi was then there, the former finance minister, Mark Diop, and went to the fund, met executive directors and the rest. So, the fund and the World Bank, they are shareholders at the countries.
Okay.
So the president picking a phone is the chairman, your shareholder, the boss, calling you. It will definitely give you the courtesy.
Okay.
And if you ask for, that's why they're designed for, to help, to do surveillance, to warn you where things are not going well, and then, come in, so they are resourced for that. That's why they came in quickly with COVID, when the COVID came, which was done faster than the global financial crisis, because they started seeing that crisis was becoming more and more common.
Okay.
Right. So, yes, it was a privilege for her to talk to, it's a woman, MD. Yeah, to talk to a president. It's a matter of diplomacy, courtesy, and realism. And he will listen. And that's why she dispatched within a week, less than a week, a team. The Ghana team was already there anyway, ready, communicating, yes. And that's the thing with working with the fund. Sometimes the call comes and you're in the house and you have to tell your spouse, I'm on my way to a mission. That's the life of the fund, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I recall very well when this is just an aside because I worked there, when the Taliban fell in 2000, and I was in the fund. And within 3 days, we were preparing to go to Afghanistan. To assist in putting, because all the structures have been brought down. And I did about 3 missions, there. So, I mean, when you are there, you know all the workers and everybody that there could be crisis, there could be something, and, you always be on the team.
Must always be ready to move at any time.
Yeah, but I was a technical assistance department, so there's a normal way of doing the technical assistance. So if you are doing something like GRE, they will visit over time, but that is planned. But even the urgent ones are planned because it's a crisis institution. They've handled crisis and whatever. So they quickly get for information. And so you hear from the news that they are here for this week just to gather data and information. Then they go back. They are not here for negotiations yet.
Okay, so they are coming in to gather data.
To update what they know.
Okay.
So
basically,
and to visit the institutions and and to see the problems, the likely possibilities and whatever. So they go and then they have an internal summit. They may consider, most likely a Ghana team will go, but these days you do Zoom as well. So in short order.
Okay.
So the negotiations will start after this.
So the first team that is coming here will come to look at the situation.
They're here. They came yesterday.
Okay.
They are starting today.
Okay, so they are looking at our situation.
Yes.
Our data.
Which is something they do regularly, but they want to be up to date. And so most probably the reports that would have gone to Parliament for media review is what's going to be discussed with them. And the NGO results, if it's still early for the whole of the NGO reports to come in, but for institutions like GRA and the rest who monitor regularly, they can provide some of the expenditure. Now we have GIFMIS, so everything goes through GIFMIS. If everything went to GIFMIS, they can get the expenditure quickly. If you do things beside GIFMIS, then somebody should be keeping record and updates, as they talk about extra budgetary and all those things. Yes. So they collect that information.
So after they take that data to the fund, they do their own analysis.
Absolutely.
Then negotiation will begin.
And then they bring in in fact, I won't be surprised if there's a World Bank team coming with them and others here, because they are sister institutions. And the World Bank is the one that provides budget support, which we need. Because remember, they've been talking of BOP, the letter from the Minister for Information said balance of payment support for the central bank, which will also give us an indication that things may not be too good, with the central bank and needs a support to support the city.
But you have read that statement yourself. Is there anything that you're gleaning from the statement that the information minister issued which we may not be seeing?
No, that statement can never be detailed. It's just giving us information about His Excellency.
Okay.
Stepping in and wanting to assuage, some of the concerns and anxieties and whatever, and giving assurance firmly that the decision is taken. It's no longer speculation. We want to go to the fund. And that they have spoken to the managing director, who has accepted to assist Ghana as a member country, although it's an obligation, yes. And therefore, she will send a team, and the team is already here.
Let me also then ask you, because there are people who have suggested that the fact that you have contacted the fund doesn't mean that you get a program or you get it immediately. How does that work?
It's not sure. No, you hardly get a program immediately because they are looking at the entire economy. Remember that it is not the money they gave you to help Bank of Ghana immediately,
okay,
the money, but they want to make sure, and people don't believe in what they want to make sure that you have measures to avoid a repetition, right? Of someone to first to cure the problem, and then so they go through the line with you. And so if your issue is, let's say, free SHS, they don't talk to the Ministry of Finance alone about the numbers. They have the World Bank in particular, they have education experts, right? Okay. Yes, because the World Bank are instructed, because they help sectors. So they go to the Ministry of Education and they sit down with them and see the structure of what you are doing. And based on their knowledge in other places, they can come in because they are experts. I went in as a mid-career, for example, when I was in tax administration, and most of what I did was a VAT.
Okay.
Because I had the experience of introducing VAT and failing in a country, that introduced VAT and failed. So what were the lessons? Right, but I then got on to do other things. So so they are not devoid of expertise, and they are, in fact, the current head of the Fiscal Affairs Department, who may play a key role, was the finance minister in Portugal.
Okay.
At one point in time, yeah.
Okay.
And I believe the managing director herself was one time in government. One of the deputies, I understand, is Atuale Sai, who was head of Africa, was a finance minister in Sierra Leone. So you are dealing with people who know economics.
Okay. So they will essentially come in. They are not only looking at the fine numbers. They sometimes have to go to the policies you are implementing, the way you
they'll spread out.
They'll access everything.
They will spread out. They'll go to, maybe not all the sector, but the key energy, which they have been pointing out, education, banking, had discussions with Bank of Ghana. So within that short period, it's almost like a sleepless night, for them, yeah.
How was it like in your instance?
I don't think much has changed, because it's always that way. And the thing about the fund is that you have to have a draft report in the field before you get back, no matter how short the mission, which you discuss with authorities.
Okay.
So usually it's full of sleepless nights.
For them or for you who are managing the economy too?
Well, they are engaging your staff. So, and the Minister of Finance staff and some of the senior people in the sector, they are used to it. We've done fund programs for many, so they are used to it.
Ghana's goal.
They are used to it. So I'm not talking about sleepless nights for only, the fund staff. Our staff who are going, and their staff in the desk officers are going, they would have contacted sector ministries, collected data. If we have arrears, if we have expenditure for whatever, you call Ministry of Roads, what's the current status of arrears and all those kind of things, yes. So it's a real engagement. And then they have constant meetings. And then at the end, they may even have audience with His Excellency himself or the Vice President. The Vice President is normally a constant.
Okay. So under the circumstances, there are people who are asking that e-levy should go. Possible?
We need to restructure. Do you know how many levies we have? Including what we left. We have the National Fiscal Stabilization Levy, which should have gone off in 2017. Okay. Then we have the FinSec Cleanup Levy, which is a top-up of the Fiscal Stabilization Levy.
Okay.
And then we have the Petroleum energy fund levy, road fund levy, which were part of SETH.
Okay.
Part of. Then we have the old health insurance. We forget it's a levy, but it was collected like VAT, get fund like VAT. We've turned it into straight levies. Then we have the e-transactions levy, which you read. We have the COVID health levy, right? Then we have retained. We have the okay. Let's see. We have the capping, which is almost like a levy, and then we have the extra levies: energy debt recovery levy, public lighting levy, national electrification scheme levy, price stabilization and recovery levy, the one we're talking about. Yes. Then we have, apart from that, the data fund levy, and then we have the sanitation and pollution levy. It's even making administration of the tax regime very complex. Because there's some of the levies that should have gone, are still in there.
Okay.
And then we were adding more and more.
So you expect a restructuring?
You are disturbing the powerful. What is a levy? Is it an excise? Is it punitive? Right? Is it a VAT? And if it's a VAT, why is business not getting credit? Why are you duplicating them? And that is why when we have used the temporary import levy and the rest in the past, we let it go.
Okay.
Because the pillars for the tax regime are one, income tax, personal income tax, and corporate income tax, which includes personal income tax includes self-employed, profit made by self-employed people. Second, excise, which is punitive. You smoke, you use fuel, environment, you drink alcohol, you pay some levy because the side effects and things, right? Then you have import duty, right? And then there's a fourth one. Yeah, there are four: import duty, corporate income tax, excise, and VAT. Yes, these are the pillars. So everything else is just mimicking, either one of these or just distorting completely, which is why some of us oppose it when the VAT was turned to straight levy. And immediately it happened as we want. If you remember, cement prices started going up. And but if you block the input tax credit, you think you will get the money, but they will increase the price because they pass it on as cost.
Let me announce the phone lines. I have 7 minutes. I can pick a few phone calls. 0302 300 282 is our main phone line. You can give us a call if you have any contributions to make. There's the matter of free SHS. There are those who have already suggested that free SHS will suffer.
It's suffering already. I mean, aren't we listening to the principals? Aren't we listening to those who provided the food? Aren't we listening? What suffering are we talking about again? Aren't we listening to the lecturers who have not been paid, asking for their cola and the rest? And we're listening to, supplies, and things to schools and all those complaints. I think we put our ears to the ground. It's suffering already.
Well, let me pick up our very first call. Good morning.
Good morning, Senna.
Your name and where you're calling us from?
Kwesi Poku
Okay, Kwesi Poku, I'm listening to you.
Senna, Honorable SETH Nana Akufo-Addo, and your Safoni. And when the first time I know, the boom, Marina, Cocoa, Senna, and your Safoni on the Banama Baby Station, my Ghana, because when you for SETH to Mimi Kwesi Poku, economy, and in Nicolas Bisano, and your Safono, Omokoso, Menyamidi, Baba, Yamishrano.
Kwesi Poku, thank you. The phone lines are still open, but the freest. But I'm wondering, would there be because you are saying you have experts who will now go to the ministries and demand that there are reforms?
They are talking to our experts. Don't underestimate the capacity of our public service. Don't underestimate, we have engineers in the Ministry of Energy.
Okay.
We have engineers in ESL. So we shouldn't think that this is one-sided. For they've been to school with some of the people there.
Well, let me pick another.
Yes, those who go to the Harvards, the Yales, and other things. Yeah, they've classmates and things. So I don't think we should underestimate our capacity at all.
Okay.
As a nation.
Yeah.
But this is why I have a abiding faith that if we have, things where we would, and the ones I like working with, just as my former boss is from Professor Mason, Mr. Hoy, and I had faith in young people like us, and whatever. If you sat around, there are young people, you put something, the next morning they are coming with some bright ideas and things.
Well, let me pick our next call. Good morning.
Good morning, Efo.
Hadia, I'm listening to you.
Thank you. Let me say good morning to your listeners. Efo, in fact, I love listening to Mr. SETH TERKPER. But my problem is to finish everything and go. We those who cannot understand English properly cannot understand what he said. And that is our problem. You see, NDC, we need people who can explain everything to us in a local language. Because you see these people, they can lie. And if you want to lie properly, unless you use this, they use this, our local language, to lie because they know some of us, we don't understand the terms and the technicalities of finance and whatever. So when they come and say it in English, translating it in Chino, they will just lie and give us a wrong definition of whatever they said. That is what is what is worrying us in Ghana. So please, Mr. SETH TERKPER, when he comes, get him time. But yet, let somebody like Asilwa be summarizing what he's saying, so that our market women will know the meaning of inflation and GDP and whatever, and how it is affecting us in our daily life and our markets.
Hadia, thank you very much. Let's just keep the phone lines open. Honorable, there's the question of does it matter who leads or who is part of the there's so much talk about the negotiating team. What does that mean, and how important is that?
Oh yes, as I said, the negotiating team in our case, which was chaired by Dr. Bochi, the discussions, had other ministers, had the central bank, had Minister of Finance, but at the time energy was key for us because of PRMA and all that, and the World Bank had experts at the table. So sometimes the negotiating team can be large, but there are side meetings. So for example, if they come with, let's say, an expert in education because of free SHS, they can have, after the opinions, they can have a side meeting, with the Ministry of Education. Energy can have a side meeting. There are not that many, but they do that, and then they go around also having discussions. It's not just sitting in the midst of. But when it comes to the real negotiations, they would have gathered all the information, and that's where a core group of people, mostly representing, because our economic management teams are some of the sector ministers, so they co-opt some of them. And the negotiation today, if it's focusing on energy, it doesn't mean that everybody, the same team is already, they can co-opt energy to come. Yes, if it's today, it's on. Of course, if it's monetary, it's usually the governor. Yeah. So it depends on what you're negotiating. Yeah, it depends. And they talk to private sector. Can we take out? They will talk to private sector. They will talk to AGI. They will talk to Bankers Association. They will talk to. Yeah, they do talk to Chamber of Commerce, Guta. Yeah.
Let me pick one last call. I have one last question to ask. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning, Sana.
Your name and where you're calling us from?
Oh, my name is Israel. Sorry from Tema.
Israel, I'm listening to you.
Thank you. Please, Mr. TERKPER, for me, whether it's possible for IMF to give us the projecting the demanding, if there is a unsustainable, if our debt ratio is not unsustainable, is it possible to give us that money?
You mean the $3 billion they're asking for?
Come again?
The $3 billion.
Yeah, the $3 billion the government is targeted to get.
Okay.
Part of that, which is balance of payments, is paid by the central bank from their profits. So it doesn't always add to public debt. It's a portion. If the portion of that $3 billion is taken for bad support, it will increase it. But this is where we call them conditionalities. They're not going to give you this money without an assurance that you have a path out of the problem. And that is where some of the things we call So we're talking about free SHS. What do you want to do with it? They give you suggestions and whatever. And it's up to you to convince them that you have a path to get out of it. In our case, it was single spine. And you remember we were already in discussions with Labour, from home to, and after, we entered the program. So then we said, look, in preliminary, this is what we have discussed with Labour. This is where we are going to spread the arrears over a period of time, and that this and that ministry will be done this month, this and that will be done this, as we gather the data, because the single spine arrears data was not.
Because already they are getting warnings from UTAG, the teachers are on their neck, and others. So they have to convince the IMF of how to handle all this.
No, it's constant. Yeah, it's constant in every reform program. Because remember, if you have inflation, those who are suffering most are those with regular salary. That's common economic theory. Whose salary increase is annual, right? And so COLA and others is to cushion them. Budget is so tight, right? And you were asking a question. I know we're closing, but you're asking a question about the fund, the face of the fund itself changing. So, for example, spending. This is what the view. Spending should be brought to pre-pandemic spending levels, while shifting expenditure composition towards social protection. This is the IMF talking.
Okay.
This is all change we're talking. They're talking. So yeah, in our case, LIP was a key thing, and they protected it in the budget.
Okay.
They wanted to make sure that the amount is we were spending on LIP and other, programs. And then say a spending review can help separate COVID-related transitory items from structural increase analysis. In other words, there's like LIP is structural. It's something you have put in to help alleviate pension payments to states and all those things is helping the vulnerable. So they are saying separate that from COVID specific, expenses, which means that they were not satisfied.
We would have to bring this to a close because I'm way past my time. But there are people who are hoping that the IMF will help us get rid of this matter of the private jet. Are we setting our expectations to her? Yes or no? Can the IMF force the president to stop using private jet? That's a question coming from Franklin, not in the UK.
It's a sovereign prerogative, and I suppose, we this is why do we want the fund to force things on us? This is a question.
Okay.
Yes. So this is a prerogative of the government, but I think that it is part of they look at it as part of the expenditure line to the presidency and all that, because no sector will be spared. But it's up to us to see the reality of it. Yes.
Honorable SETH EMMANUEL, thank you. Thank you very much. He's a former finance minister. Well, I guess we'll have to do this again very soon, if he is around. Well, my name is Nana Akufo-Addo. From the rest of my team, I say a big thank you for making time to join us on the show today. Bajimba is up next, but don't forget that Kokonsa reporting has started. So 5:30 p.m. Those of you who've been asking about Kokonsa reporting, please tune in. You'll get to hear Kokonsa live on Radio Gold. The mid-moon is starting Wednesday. No. Today is what? Okay. See, I forgot to. Today is Wednesday. He won't come. He won't come today, please. So tune in tomorrow. You'll be around tomorrow. So the mid-morning show, the award-winning mid-morning show with the Bajimba himself, the king of mid-morning. Stick and stay.
Ghana's Gold. Radio Gold.
Radio Gold. The difference is Radio Gold.
The station.
Radio Gold.